Welcome back to Wrestling with Horror. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and as always, I am here to talk about professional wrestling. I'm here to talk about horror movies, and I look at all the ways that they intersect, connect, and everything in between. Now, I like talking about horror movies, and I like talking about professional wrestling, but those two don't always connect or cross over. But I thought today would be a good day to talk about the times that they do cross over. And there are quite a few examples of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this little mini-series. I'm calling it Horrific Wrestlers. Now, horrific typically has a negative connotation, but not today. Not when we're talking about this topic. In this instance, horrific simply means horror. Horror gimmicks that professional wrestlers have. And I think that that's a very interesting topic to discuss because there are a lot of professional wrestlers who have horror gimmicks. And I'm going to cover a lot of those over the next few weeks. But I thought a pretty good place to start would be with one of the most iconic wrestlers with a horror gimmick. And of course, that would be The Undertaker. Now, of course, Undertaker debuted at Survivor Series in 1990, and we got that iconic line of, "Look at the size of that ham hock." And, you know, he debuted there, and the rest is just kind of history at this point. I mean, it's over 30 years later now, and he's still just as much of an icon as he was, you know, just people were starstruck when they saw him. They'd never seen anything quite like that because at the time it was the WWF, and during that time they were kind of campy, they were cheesy, a lot of goofy things, because that show, that Survivor Series 1990 show was actually the same night that the Gobbledygooker debuted when he came out of his egg. And, well, Undertaker ain't the Gobbledygooker. But what did we actually see when Undertaker debuted? We saw this giant man walking just meticulously, just so slowly down to the ring. He was a tank. He was giant. He was basically, the idea was that he was an Undertaker for a graveyard, but he's like this undead zombie version of that. And of course, you bring in Paul Bearer to manage him and add that aspect of it to the character. And through the years, of course, this character evolved into many different things. You had, he kind of moved into a different style, but keeping that same, he wasn't always just as slow as possible. And he actually turned into like this kind of cult leader when he started the Ministry. And this version of Undertaker is probably the darkest and the most evil version of the character. And it's something that kind of gets, I don't want to say glossed over, but it kind of gets glossed over when you look at the history of the character, because a lot of people think of that original iteration with the gray gloves, and then you got the purple version, and then you got the Ministry version, and of course you get the biker version of the character, which is a little outside the realm of horror. But then, of course, in 2004, he returned as the Dead Man and went on an even greater run than he had before. And during that time, he became the Phenom, and he was just keeping this persona of having just that horror element to him. He was always dark. He came out to just this orchestral music, and it was so foreboding. And the fog that filled the arena, the lightning strikes, the tombstone on the screen that you would see. And of course, his move is known as the Tombstone Pile Driver, and another finisher that he used was called the Last Ride. All of these things relate to the character being an actual Undertaker. And of course, his last match in the WWE was the Boneyard match against AJ Styles, which was essentially a cinematic buried alive match. Undertaker had several of these buried alive matches, usually using them to go away when he needed to recover from an injury or something like that. The most I guess, iconic. The one that changed him the most was, of course, that the Buried Alive match against Mr. McMahon, where he had the match won, and of course his brother Kane came out and basically turned the tides and put him in the grave and dumped the dirt on him. And we didn't see him again until WrestleMania. And the look on Kane's face when Undertaker finally appeared after what felt like an eternity is really what sold that story. We hadn't seen him for a while. He had grown his hair back out. He had the duster and the hat and everything else. And of course, he just had this element of just spookiness to him throughout his entire career. But what aspects of this actually make it related to horror? Of course, you had the undead zombie kind of thing going with Undertaker, which is a huge aspect of horror movies. You know, you have a lot of zombie movies out there, a lot of Romero movies and different things, even the comedy ones like Shaun of the Dead and things like that. There are a lot of zombie movies out there. Walking Dead is an insanely popular show. Zombies are just always interesting to people. And this is basically what The Undertaker was for a majority of his career. He was a zombie. Especially that first part where he didn't speak. He came out there, he was silent. He was just kind of stoic. He stood there. And he just was very, like I said, meticulous with the way he moved in the ring. And you would get these little bursts of energy, and that just elevated him even higher. And this character just, it transcended what people thought a character could be in wrestling. I mean, for a character to last for 30 years, despite the changes that had to be made to keep it relevant, for a character to last 30 years, that's something special. And you're probably not going to see anything like that. Maybe not ever, but if something does, it'll be a very long time. We're not going to see anything like that anytime soon. Now, of course, if you watched my list of favorite wrestlers that I did when this channel was very early on, Undertaker was on that list. He's been one of my favorites for most of my life. I've always really enjoyed the character. I like everything that this character's done. Now, his matches weren't always spectacular. Especially early on, some of those WrestleMania matches, just, oh, they were kind of, I don't want to say stinkers, but they were stinkers. You know what I mean? They were not what we would come to expect later on in his career. And of course, you can't have a video talking about The Undertaker without mentioning his streak at WrestleMania. Now, of course, this wasn't like something that was intentional from the beginning, but once it was acknowledged, once people were made known that this was a thing, it became this thing every year. Year after year, somebody would step up and say, I'm going to end your streak. I'm going to finally dethrone you at WrestleMania. And nobody ever could. There were several times where you thought just maybe it was going to happen. A couple matches stick out to me. The first one, his match with Randy Orton at WrestleMania. Fantastic match. And I think that if you would have had Randy Orton beat Undertaker there, I think that would have been okay. But I'm glad that the streak went on to become what it did beyond that. The other match is Undertaker and Triple H in Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania. That match, especially right after the super kick pedigree combo that he got hit with, for him to kick out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. But those are the biggest matches that kind of stick out to me. And of course, we all know that Brock Lesnar was the one who actually ended the Undertaker streak. I don't know that that was really the best way to end the streak. It makes sense. I've heard Paul Heyman explain this before in a video, and the way he explained it made sense to me. So I'm not really going to knock that. What I have more of an issue with is Roman Reigns beating him again a few years after that. I don't think that was really needed. It was an attempt to push Roman to the top, and at the time, the audience just wasn't having it. They didn't want to see Roman at the top. And then the next night, for him to just come out and say, this is my yard now, after just getting showered in boos. And they should have turned him heel there, but they decided to try to keep pushing him as a babyface, and that just didn't work. Did not work for me, and I don't think it really worked for anybody. However, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about The Undertaker. And like I said, just from the very beginning, he just had this dark, ominous presence about him that really made him look like a character out of a horror movie. You don't really get things like that anymore. WWE's a completely different place than it was back then, and I don't know. I love the character so much, and I can't help it. Like, this is the one that everybody thinks of when you think of wrestlers with horror gimmicks, and of course there are others, and we're going to talk about those too. But this is the one that I really wanted to start with. So, that being said, let me know down in the comments what your feelings are on The Undertaker as it relates to horror. Are there any elements that you think I might have missed? Because I very well could have. I be honest with you, I get nervous when I film, and sometimes I forget things. So if I forgot anything, please let me know down below. And what wrestlers do you want to see in this series next? I've got a few people in mind, but I really want to hear what you all have to say about it. I know it's been a few days since I posted, and I was sick for a while, and then I got a little better, and I filmed that video talking about Cody and WrestleMania and what's next, all of that. And then I kind of got sick again, and I was barely able to speak. I just couldn't really get anything done. I was feeling horrible, but I'm better now, and I'm going to get rolling. I got a review that I'm going to post in a couple days of a movie I just watched, and from there, we're just going to keep rolling. We've got some horror reviews coming up. We've got this series, Horrific Wrestlers, that's going to continue. I'm really looking forward to doing the next video on this. This kind of thing excites me. I love when wrestling and horror cross over and intersect. That's kind of what this whole channel is founded upon. And I haven't done anything where they cross over in a long time, but I thought this was just the perfect opportunity to start that. So, thank you for watching the video. If you made it to the end, leave a thumbs up on this video. Hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing. Turn your notification bell on because there's going to be a lot more coming your way. My name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.